Good morning, everyone. I would like us to stand at this time and have prayer by Ms. Sherry Edwards, teacher, Claudia, Creque Educational Center, followed by the territorial song and territorial pledge by the students of the Elmhurst High School Music Department.
Good morning, everyone. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, God, we want to thank you for waking us up this morning and bringing us here safely, whereby we can gather and listen to this debate. I pray that you may be with the students, grant them clarity of speech, of thought, and that at the end of this debate, we would all learn something valuable that we can put to use in our communities and our families. So guide these proceedings, I ask, and take us back to our various homes safely at the end of this all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Want to express sincere thanks to the students of the Elmhurst High School for the territorial song and to teacher Ms. Edwards for the prayer. Officers present, Mr. Moderator, adjudicators, auditors, timekeeper, members of the GIS team, principals, teachers, coaches, parents and supporters viewing online, debaters, good morning. I have to do this every time. Good morning. Okay, thank you. No, that's better. Sounds like we had breakfast. I want to welcome us to the semi-final round of the 2021 Inter-Secondary Schools Debate Competition. Let me welcome you and say thank you for being here and supporting the students of the Virgin Islands. 4 schools have made it to this round. The 4 schools are, and in no particular order, we have the Claudia Creque Educational Center, the Ciboney Center for Excellence, Elmore South High School, and the Brigada Flax Educational Center. And today you're going to hear from these schools as they debate 2 very topical issues, and I trust that we are all going to enjoy the debates today. I just want to thank all our officials year after year. They willingly accept the challenge to come to adjudicate or to be our timekeeper or be our judges and scorekeepers. And so I just want to say on behalf of the Ministry of Education how grateful we are for your continuous assistance and support. The first debate will see the Ciboney Center for Excellence versus the Claudia Creque Educational Center. And the teams are already in place, but I'm just going to identify them. Students, when you hear your name, just stand and be recognized. From the Ciboney Center for Excellence, we have Gift Obinayo. Jesse Cook will be our second speaker, and by the way, Gift will be the first speaker for the team. The rebuttal will be Mr. Benjamin Moore. And we have the Claudia Creque Educational Center, our first speaker, Ms. Garcia Johnson. Second speaker, Liali Rosario. And the rebuttal, Ms. Angelina Evans. The debates are very important to our young people, and what do? They encourage students to improve their public speaking skills and communicate various forms of argument, as we noticed in the preliminary round of the debates. We had some very, very good presentations. And not only that they're able to speak clearly and fluently to the audience, they're also able to build camaraderie among themselves as they're coming from different schools. Additionally, this competition helped to foster a relationship with our stakeholders, the Ministry of Education, the schools, and the community. And with the community, I want to at this time acknowledge our sponsors. They're the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries, and Agriculture, Delta Petroleum, Video, British Virgin Islands, and Aliman, Cordero, Galindo, and Lee Trust. They're the sponsors of this year's debate, and they will be making sure that all the students, all of them, are recognized for their hard work, because as we know, it is not as easy as we think to come and stand before an audience. Our first debate, MOOT, will be, and listen carefully, the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruptions. I'll say it again. The reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruption. I'm curious to hear what the debaters have to say on this matter. And before we get into the debate, I will introduce to us our moderator, Mr. Cromwell Edgewenka Smith. He's the managing director of a media production company called Media One. He's the producer and host of the radio show Umoja, and this is heard now during the day on Mondays and Wednesdays, just about 1 p.m. So if you are available, please tune in to ZBVI radio station, and there you can hear Mr. Cromwell Smith as he gives us, because he's a community activist, and he uses every opportunity he has to share with us, his audience, about culture, the heritage of these islands, about health and wellness, and lately he has been on the road to health and wellness on his programs, among other things. Edgewenka has served on many boards and committees, and is presently a member of the Board of Governors at the H. Labrador South Community College. He's also a recipient of the Paul Harris Fellow Award from the Rotary Club of Tortola for his exemplary community service. When it comes to serving his community, Edgewenka can be called upon within a moment's notice. And year after year, as some of our adjudicators are, he's always here to moderate our debate, and we are eternally grateful to him. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll turn you over now to the moderator as we get prepared for our debates. Thank you.
Peace and blessings, everyone. I would have to thank you, Teacher Ayaselu, for those very, very kind words. I'll give you a service one. Thank you. Well, you heard the MOOT, the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders will lead to greater economic disruptions. The teams have been introduced, and so let me introduce our auditors. Lauren Welch, give her a round of applause. Ms. Glenda Stevens, a round of applause. And our ever faithful timekeeper, Mr. Renee Phipps. And of course, our adjudicators, Sarah Benjamin is the chief adjudicator. Sarah is a barrister at law who also holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Acadia University in Canada. She worked in the Director of Public Prosecutor's Office for over 6 years and left that office as a senior Crown Counsel in January of 2014 to her present post as a Deputy Registrar at the Supreme Court. Besides her love for the law, she also enjoys learning about different people as well as their cultures, and is presently pursuing this interest through learning their languages. She speaks Spanish, although not fluently, after sharing her time between Spain and the BVI over the past year and a half. Give a warm welcome for Sarah Benjamin. Mr. Ryan Gillock attended Wilfrid Laurier University, obtaining a Bachelor of Business Administration degree with honors before moving on to do his certified accountant qualifications a year later. He worked for BDO in his hometown of Richtown following university. He moved to the BVI with BDO in 2003. He is a Deputy Managing Director and oversees audit and technical risk advisory portfolios. Ryan has held various positions in the Rotary Club of Rotown. He also sits on various industry committees within the financial services sector, including acting as president of the BVI Association of Professional Accountants, a member of Financial Services Business Development Committee, the BVI Finance and Value Added Services Subcommittees of the Financial Services Implementation Unit, and the Securities and Investment Business Advisory Committee. When not at work or involved in Rotary, Ryan enjoys spending time with his family, reading, and just relaxing with friends. He is an avid sports fanatic with passions for basketball, soccer, hockey, and football. Give a warm welcome to Ryan Gillock. Mr. Hakeem Creque is a proud native of Virgin Gorda. Hakeem Creque holds a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, International Relations from the University of Central Florida, a Bachelor's of Law honors, and did his bar professional training course at the University of Law in London. He was admitted as a barrister to the Bar of England and Wales in July 2014 by the Honorable Society of Lincoln's Inn and the Bar of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court in December 2014. In 2018, he was one of the recipients of the Shevering Scholarship and holds a Master's in Commercial and Corporate Law from Queen's Mary University in London. Mr. Creque worked as Crown Counsel at the Attorney General's Chambers in the Civil Division. He presently works at Martin Kenny and Company. In his spare time, Mr. Creque enjoys traveling and spending time creating new business concepts for the Virgin Islands. His hope is to one day become a Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Mr. Creque's motto in life is, "Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I am possible." Give a warm welcome for Mr. Akeem Creque. Our judging criteria are as follows. For soundness of points, 35. Logical development, 20. Audibility and clarity, 15. Posture and personality, 15. Command of the language, 15. Group coordination, 10, for a total of 110 points. The rebuttal judging criteria consists of recall of points with 10, recall and general analysis of debate, 14, ability to refute, 20, spontaneity, 6, for a total of 50 points. The best speaker and overall best speaker criteria: audibility and clarity, 15 points, articulation, 15 points, voice and modulation, 10 points, command of material, 10 points, persuasiveness, 15 points, fluency, 15 points, eye contact, 5 points, body language, 15 points, for a total of 100 points. All the speakers will be considered when judging for best speaker. All the speakers will be considered when judging for best speaker. Our procedures are: the first speakers for the proposition and opposition have 8 minutes to present their cases. The second speakers have 5 minutes, and there will be a 5 minutes of silence for teams to prepare their rebuttals. After which the opposition and the proposition have 4 minutes for rebuttal. The timekeeper gives a signal 1 minute before the expiration of each speaker's allotted time. That sounds just like the school bell. Following the rebuttals, the adjudicators will retire for 15-minute deliberations. The auditors will collect the score sheets from the adjudicators, calculate the final scores, determine the best speaker and the winning team, and return the results to the adjudicators. Upon the return of the officials, the best speaker adjudicator, the chief adjudicator will each give a 5-minute constructive critique of the performances and announce the winners. The timekeeper, of course, again, will signal 1 minute before the allotted times. The audience, you will applaud as each speaker is introduced, and you will applaud appropriately during the debate if you feel to do so. And we will maintain a nice, polite posture, applauding again at appropriate times. Now for the debate. Let us give a warm welcome for our proposition's first speaker, Gif Obenaya.
The infamous Charles Darwin said, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives, It's the one that is the most adaptable to change. Mr. Moderator, esteemed judges, my worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, good morning. The MOOT states that the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruptions. We, the members of the proposition, wholeheartedly support this MOOT. For the purpose of this debate, I will define a few key terms taken from the Cambridge Dictionary. The word reopen means to operate or become open for people to use after being closed for a period of time. Borders are the line that divides one country from another, and economic disruption is the action of preventing trade, industry, or money from continuing as usual or expected. Based on these definitions, my colleagues and I believe that if the Virgin Islands is opened for economic activity, there would be more negative than positive economic consequences. Mr. Moderator, my colleagues and I will discuss that the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders will create greater economic disruptions by 1. Increasing COVID-19 cases through importation of tourists, which will advance the community spread. 2. Overwhelming the medical capacity of our healthcare services. 3. Posing great risk to local businesses. And 4. Presenting greater risk to our local population through the relaxation of protocols. Firstly, Mr. Moderator, the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders will cause the number of COVID-19 cases to rise through tourist arrivals, which will naturally advance and become community spread within the population. We can certainly all agree that lockdown was not the easiest thing to go through. However, if we open our borders and allow people into our territory, how are we sure that these people are virus-free? Let's look at what happened in Grenada in December 2020. According to the island's Ministry of Health, a cluster of 26 positive COVID-19 coronavirus cases had been linked to the Sandals Grenada. The positive cases included guests and employees, as well as their locals and their close contacts. Consequently, the all-inclusive hotel had been asked to move their guests off the island as quickly as possible and to divert all other expected arrivals to hotels in other countries. Months prior to the reopening, Grenada had enjoyed a relatively low COVID-free status. Can you imagine the economic hardships suffered by businesses and locals due to the reopening of the country's borders? Mr. Moderator, the COVID-19 test does not guarantee that a person is virus-free. Molecular tests, also called PCR tests, according to Robert H. Smerling, MD, Senior Faculty Editor of Harvard Health Publishing, the rate of false negatives, a test that says you don't have the virus when you actually do have the virus, varies depending on how long an infection has been present. In one study, the false negative rate was 20% when testing was performed 5 days after symptoms began, but much higher, up to 100% earlier in infection. Therefore, persons can be asymptomatic, showing no signs or symptoms, be walking among us, and then it's too late. The antigen tests, also referred to as rapid tests, which are commonly used, are worse when it comes to detecting the virus. According to Robert H. Smerling, false negative results tend to occur more often with antigen tests than with molecular tests. This is why antigen tests are not favored by the FDA as a single test for active infection. This study demonstrates what my colleagues and I fear. One undetected infected person can put the entire Virgin Islands at risk. To date, the BVI have recorded 2 cases of persons who cleared their pre-arrival, day 0, and day 4 tests, yet tested positive on departure. Mr. Moderator, that in itself should be a red flag for our system of testing and handling of tourists within our borders. If this pattern was to continue, community spread would run rampant. Can we financially handle another full 24-hour lockdown for 3 to 4 weeks when cases rise? Is there enough money in the loan from the Social Security Board to handle more multi-million-dollar food bag assistance to families? How will we survive? Whenever the topic of whether we should open the borders or not arises, this is a question that is asked and must be answered. My question to you is, how did your forefathers survive? We, the people of the Virgin Islands, are resilient and need to go back to our roots. Our safety and survival as a people should be a greater priority rather than earning a profit. Secondly, the Virgin Islands healthcare system is by no means prepared for the reopening of the borders and the influx of COVID-19 cases that will follow. While the closing of borders has had a far-reaching impact on everyone in the world, in the Virgin Islands, we have yet to face the full wrath of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital currently only has 120 beds and 9 ventilators for the estimated 30,030 residents. That is 1 bed per 250 people. Please tell me, Mr. Moderator, how should the healthcare industry prioritize who should get treatment in the hospital? Who should or should not receive a ventilator? Are we prepared to play with the lives of our people? Let's look at the numbers. In the first 8 months of COVID-19, according to the statistical release of the government of the Virgin Islands, our territory had 73 people test positive for COVID-19. After the borders partially opened on December 1st, 2020, the first 56 days saw the territory effectively doubling its positive cases to 151 people. Countries that are our regional neighbors, such as St. Lucia and Barbados, initially held steady within the first instance of border reopening. But look at them now. All back under lockdown circumstances, children are out of school again, and everything has closed. Their economies are once again at a standstill. Community spread, healthcare and trauma, businesses shut, schools closed, people isolated. I ask you, my opponents, is it worth it? So let's take a different approach with New Zealand as an excellent example. New Zealand is continuing with closed borders likely through 2021, but with set travel bubbles with regional neighbors and a massive encouragement of supporting local businesses, thus generating an internal income. Prime Minister Ardern said, "We will never know what would have actually happened without our level 4 restrictions, but we can look overseas and see that this devastating scenario has played out in many other countries. Through our cumulative actions, we have avoided the worst. After all of our hard work and sacrifices, are we prepared for the worst? Or are we prepared to step into our greatness and lead by example?" Mr. Moderator, we are sensible people. We see the issues on the horizon. Let's not walk right into it and regret it later. Thank you.
Eight minutes, 0 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Phipps. Now let's give another warm welcome for the opposition's first speaker, Ms. Garcia Johnson.
As the plane descended at the TB Letsum Airport, Kelly adjusted her mask and wondered what awaited her with all the COVID restrictions. She had been waiting a long time for the borders to reopen. Upon entry, the passengers were greeted by the agent and told to deboard. Once on the tarmac, they were loaded into a taxi and all documents scanned, verified, and whisked off to quarantine. For the first time, Kelly felt relieved. She felt safe. Even amidst the COVID situation, she was back in the VI and could enjoy the sun, sea, and sand. She felt the love. Mr. Moderator, esteemed judges, my respected opponents, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning. My counterparts and I strongly oppose the MOOT. The reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruptions. Stephen Hoffman, an international lawyer and epidemiologist at York University in Toronto, Canada, noted that total border closures and related measures cost the global economy some US $400 billion every month. Mr. Moderator, there is no doubt that closing of borders caused more harm than good. Before I begin, let me address the key terms of this MOOT. Firstly, according to dictionary.com, borders is a line separating two countries, administrative divisions, or other areas. Secondly, greater refers to something with more intensity or above average. Economic disruption, according to Merriam-Webster Online, refers to a disturbance or problems that interrupt production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Therefore, based on these definitions, it is already clear that closing borders brought about more economic harm than good to the British Virgin Islands. My counterparts and I will argue 4 main points, which will clearly show that the reopening of borders would not cause greater economic disruptions. 1, the use of protocols. 2, revival of tourism. 3, recovery and growth of the economy. 4, reducing national debts. Mr. Moderator, the closing of borders would not cause greater economic disruptions once effective protocols are put in place and continuously updated. According to policyoptions.org, in theory, targeted border closures prevent incoming travel from high-risk countries by non-citizens who might have been exposed to a pathogen, who might be carrying it, and who might transmit that pathogen to others. However, that theory is far from reality. Binker 2020 argues that people find ways of traveling to their destinations if they really want to do so, either by first traveling to a third country or by traveling through unofficial channels. Mr. Moderator, here in the VI, we can testify to that because last year, the BVI reported a spike in coronavirus cases due to alleged smuggling of persons into the territory, VirginIslandsNewsDaily.com. Mr. Moderator, borders were closed, yet businesses had to cut back, persons were sent home from work, and economic disruptions continued. Therefore, countries rely heavily on using strict protocols at their borders to ensure they do not ultimately kill sectors of the economy that are largely suffering. For instance, according to Flood et al. 2020, proven use of quarantine, and I quote, is supported by science, proportionate to the risk involved, and respectful of human rights. And mandatory quarantine should be equally as effective as closing the borders if fully implemented and enforced, end of quote. Mr. Moderator, during this pandemic, our government worked assiduously to implement laws relating to a safe and controlled reopening of the territory's borders to citizens and visitors alike, whilst keeping citizens safe and healthy. This was done in a phased manner since June 2020. Protocols were formulated and effectively communicated to potential travelers and the wider community. Mr. Moderator, in December 2020, we officially reopened our borders. Re-entry protocols were observed and tourists were welcomed into the territory. Quite naturally, citizens were uneasy when they heard announcements of the COVID-19 cases. However, these cases, when detected, were already in quarantine and not within the community. Mr. Moderator, did the presence of cases in late 2020 and early January 2021 cause greater economic disruptions? Were lockdown orders issued? Of course not. Do you want to know why? Because we had protocols in place. Cases were quarantined and not released before they received a negative test result. And when they were released, they had to wear geofencing devices that tracked their movements and follow the laws we all are following, wearing masks, sanitizing, and social distancing. This brings me to my second point, the effects closing of borders have on tourism. According to the OECD, the COVID-19 crisis has hit the tourism economy hard, with unprecedented effects on jobs and businesses. Not only was tourism one of the first sectors to be deeply impacted by the pandemic, the sector also risked being among one of the last to recover, with the ongoing travel restrictions and the global recession. Mr. Moderator, this has had dire consequences for many worldwide and here in the BVI. For instance, living on Anegada, one of the main tourism hubs in the BVI, it is not difficult to see how border closures have affected businesses, my family, and the community at large. According to Premier Andrew Foy, compared to 2019 and based on estimates for 2020, tourist arrival levy fell by 1.8 million. This is significant because a fair portion of the BVI economy relies on international tourism. According to timeout.com, many parts of the tourist ecosystem, from popular tourist attractions to hotels to regional tour operators, are still suffering despite the gradual recovery of many other parts of the leisure, entertainment, and hospitality sector. Mr. Moderator, according to nature.com, the gains from border closures were short-lived when they weren't combined with other measures such as testing, contact tracing, and quarantining to prevent local transmission. Mr. Moderator, here in the BVI, we are already leading the pack as we try to boost our tourism industry that has been so hard hit by this pandemic. There is no doubt that opening borders and putting protocols in place, as our government has efficiently done, will help to boost and revive our tourism industry, which will in turn have a positive spill-off on the overall economy. In the words of our Premier, Mr. Andrew Foy, and I quote, "The challenge of the new regular is to strike the ideal balance between lives and livelihoods. Therefore, I stand here and firmly oppose the MOOT that the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruptions. I rest my case."
Eight minutes, 31 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Phipps. Now let's give a warm welcome for the proposition's second speaker, Mr. Jesse Cook.
John Stackhouse, Senior Vice President in the Office of the CEO for the Royal Bank of Canada and a leading voice on innovation and economic disruption, said in reference to the pandemic, COVID did not crush the future, it merely brought us forward. Mr. Moderator, I acknowledge the protocol already established and wish to further add support to what my colleague has already told you. The reopening of the borders in the Virgin Islands will lead to greater economic disruption by 1, posing a great risk to local businesses, and 2, presents greater risk to our local population through the relaxing of protocols. Firstly, what is the economic cost compared to the profit associated with operating a business in COVID times? Who is responsible for associated costs due to community spread? Let's look at a recent issue at local Virgin Gorda restaurant Coco Maya. Unbeknownst to them, they entertained a positive guest at their Old Year's Night event, which caused them to shut down for 5 days to heavily disinfect the restaurant. This resulted in a loss of revenue and testing and quarantining of staff members and family members. In addition, local patrons who were at the event had to self-isolate to prevent community spread. Would the little profit from one night with international visitors cover medical expenses, quarantine costs, and loss of wages? Mr. Moderator, How about we shift our focus to empowering the local patrons and businesses? For years, we have heard the public ask for diversification of our economy, greater investment in our local businesses, and the fostering of our local agriculture and fisheries. In a recent survey of local businesses in the Virgin Islands conducted by our team, a resounding 100% of respondents indicated that they thought the closing of our borders was a good decision for the safety of all. Further to that, 70% believed there were enough local economy to allow their business to survive the pandemic. And 70% also felt that such a closure gives way to more local investment and money staying within the territory. In the same article about thoughtful leadership on COVID, John Stackhouse of RBC says, "When the recovery takes form, entrepreneurs will find pearls of opportunity. Yes, the novel coronavirus that swamped us economically can also unleash waves of innovation as we change the way we work, shop, eat, and travel." Secondly, Mr. Moderator, based on the relaxed mindsets we have seen in communities across the territory, are we not posing a great risk to our general population by allowing COVID to freely enter our borders? The territory has had to implement curfews, ignite social distancing task forces, and legislate fines, all an effort to educate and enforce the seriousness of the pandemic within our borders. But yet persons are seen still not doing their part and protecting our future. Bars are opened, nightclubs are frequently visited, and gatherings are being held. Are protocols being followed? Mr. Moderator, if we cannot control our own people and teach them the importance of self-regulation and following established protocols for our own protection, how are we expected to control and contain any outbreaks with outside influences in the mix? Additionally, if we do not enforce such laws and implement designated fines, how do we hope to reduce any potential spread? Old Year's Night was just one example of a time for the perfect storm to occur. Large crowds, protocols thrown to the side, and laws not enforced, and the willingness to feel normal for just one night. And what happened? A tourist who tested negative on day 4 was released and COVID was unleashed. One tourist, hundreds of lives affected in self-isolation, testing, sanitizing businesses, and a world of emotional and mental stress. Are we really ready? Reopening the borders will increase COVID-19 cases through the importation of tourists, which will advance to community spread. Reopening the borders will overwhelm the medical capacity of our healthcare services, and reopening the borders will pose a great risk to local businesses and pose a great risk to the well-being of our population in many sectors. We rest our case. Thank you.
Time, 4 minutes, 39 seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Thank you, Mr. Phipps. Let's give a warm welcome for opposition's second speaker, Ms. Leali Rosario.
The COVID-19 pandemic is first and foremost a human crisis with over 2.3 million deaths and rising. However, there's no denying that the global economy has fallen victim to this virus. At the start of the crisis, countries the world over, including the British Virgin Islands, used a blunt tool to arrest the spread of the virus by shutting borders to limit the human impact. But as the crisis continues, it is obvious that this approach is not sustainable. The cost of a crumbling global economy is just too heavy a burden to bear as a consequence of this relentless disease. Mr. Moderator, judges, my worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, I stand resolute with my teammates as we oppose the MOOT. The reopening of the Virgin Island borders will lead to great economic disruptions. I will show how instead of economic disruptions, reopening of the Virgin Island borders will lead to, first, a stimulation of recovery and growth of the economy, and second, closing the fiscal floodgate, thereby reducing national debt. Mr. Moderator, the reopening of the Virgin Island borders will not lead to more economic disruptions, but instead it will stimulate recovery and growth of our economy. According to Creque and Hale 2020, the rapid and aggressive implementation of lockdown measures from as early as the second week in March 2020 have had a direct impact on economies, curtailing economic activity, forcing businesses to operate at inefficient scale. Lockdowns are a significant supply shock. Premier Foy, in his 2021 budget address, stated that taxes on goods and services declined by $38.7 million when compared to 2019, and income and payroll tax revenue dropped by $7.4 million due to the disruptions in economic activity by COVID-19. Mr. Moderator, these figures are alarming. The benefits to the economy by reopening the border far outweigh the dismal pictures of the grave consequences that my counterparts have tried to paint. By reopening the borders, a recovery and growth in the economy will be attained because travel helps to generate trade, promote business, as my first speaker Kelly showed, and create employment opportunities. Mr. Moderator, in these COVID times, this is exactly what my beloved BVI needs: economic recovery and growth, not economic decline. This brings me to my second point. The reopening of Virgin Island borders will not cause great economic disruptions, but instead it will close the fiscal floodgate, thereby reducing national debt. A fiscal floodgate refers to the numerous stimulus packages that the world leaders have been rolling out to help their citizens deal with the devastating effects of COVID-19 on citizens and businesses' ability to be economically sustainable. As a result of these stimulus packages, nations have incurred national debt. In his 2021 budget address, Premier Foy outlined stimulus expenses in excess of $50 million. Mr. Moderator, as a result of these packages, our government stands at a whopping $149 million. By reopening our borders in a safe and controlled way, a direct positive impact will be felt in the economy as citizens and businesses' spending and earning power improve. By so doing, the government will be no longer in a position to cushion the devastating impact that comes with closing the borders. There will need for the numerous stimulus programs financed by loans our governments may have to acquire, because citizens and businesses will be earning and well capable to sustain themselves. So therefore, even the blind can see that the reopening of borders cannot lead to great economic disruptions, but it will lead instead to great economic gains. Mr. Moderator, judges, my listening audience, the COVID-19 pandemic has left economies and businesses counting the cost as governments struggle with new lockdown measures to tackle the spread of the virus. Be not dismayed, all is not lost. The pandemic provides a prime opportunity for us to build back better. It is clear that COVID-19 is here to stay. However, life has to move on. The world has to move on. We must coexist with this virus. I reiterate our focus in the BVI should be on opening our borders in a safe and controlled way that will lead to great economic activity by stimulating economic growth and recovery, revitalizing the tourism industry and closing the fiscal floodgates, thereby reducing national debt by protocols in place to ensure health and safety of VI visitors and citizens alike. We, the opposing voices, have convincingly shown that the reopening of Virgin Island borders will not lead to great economic disruptions. I thank you.
Time, 5 minutes, 13 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phipps, and thank you, Ms. Rosario. Now we're going to take 5 minutes of complete silence in order for the teams to prepare their rebuttals. Let's give a warm welcome for the opposition's rebuttal speaker, Ms. Angelina Evans.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning. My colleagues and I would not only like to oppose the MOOT, but have to. To claim that the reopening of borders would cause further economic disruptions is nothing short of an attempt to undermine the intelligence of our people and insult the progress our governments have made while trying to balance saving lives and livelihoods. The first speaker stated that the border should remain closed because infection rates will spike, resulting in community spread, more medical expenses, layoffs, and lockdowns. But, as my first speaker said, protocols are put in place by the government and laws have been put in place to ensure that the borders are being opened in a cautious and controlled way to keep the residents and tourists safe. The first speaker also mentioned that residents will be given stimulus packages, so there is no need to risk opening the border. Mr. Moderator, my opponents are definitely over-exaggerating and miscalculating. To recall what my second speaker has said, the more stimulus packages that get handed out, the deeper and deeper we dig ourselves into the hole that is national debt. Maybe, instead of wasting money on stimulus packages, which cost millions upon millions, maybe we should focus on reopening our borders so that we can actually gain instead of lose. My opponent's argument is fundamentally flawed. They are painting the picture that keeping the borders closed is the right thing to do, when in fact, it is not. Besides, the borders are already partially open via the airport, so what exactly are we arguing? That people should live off of stimulus checks for who knows how long? That we should stifle tourism, one of the BVI's main economic pillars? The only reasonable and economical course of action would be to reopen the borders fully. The first speaker maintained that cases will rise if the borders reopen, but as my teammates argued, the presence of cases does not equate to a full-on outbreak. Once people follow the protocols and safety measures put in place, coupled with vaccinations resulting in herd immunity, then we will not have a problem. My worthy opponents are presenting some rather unworthy arguments. You want to know what causes economic disruptions? Ask the businesses who usually supply provisions to yachts, or the restaurants and hotels that have closed because their main clientele, tourists, have been absent because our borders aren't fully open. Ask the people who have been laid off and have bills to pay. They will all tell you the same thing, that the borders being closed does more harm than good. We all know that the seaports are the main gateway by which tourists enter the BVI. The proposition has maintained that opening the borders will pose a threat to residents. Mr. Moderator, as my teammates argued, there are protocols put in place, laws put in place, task forces, and stiff fines have been implemented. Opponents, closed borders is simply unrealistic and uneconomical. Ladies and gentlemen, wake up, smell the coffee, and join us in opposition of this MOOT. Educate our people. Open your minds and fully reopen our borders. I thank you.
Time, 3 minutes, 25 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Phipps. Now let's give a warm welcome for the proposition's rebuttal speaker, Mr. Benjamin.
As the proverb states, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. Mr. Moderator, I want to reiterate what my colleagues have previously stated, as well as address some of the points the opposition raised. Firstly, the leader of the opposition stated that many local businesses are forced to close and had to unemploy people due to the borders being closed. Mr. Moderator, the argument is false. Who will be available to work when the COVID cases go up and tourism businesses are forced to close haphazardly due to the borders reopening? During the past 8 months, the people of the Virgin Islands have failed to follow the basic advice from organizations such as CARPA and the WHO. Based on this, the government of the Virgin Islands had to pass an emergency legislation to protect the citizens, such as mask wearing, social distancing, sanitization, and had to implement fines and a curfew, which we are still in, to ensure the public followed the rules. As our second speaker said, if our people can't follow these basic guidelines, how do we expect the tourists to follow them? Secondly, the leader of the opposition stated that with the borders being closed because of COVID-19, the tourism industry was hit hard. Mr. Moderator, they are wrong. About 1/5 of the population is attributed towards tourism jobs. Are we really going to put 4/5 of our population at risk just to open the borders to employ 1/5 of the population? With the borders being closed, this gives that 1/5 of the population a chance to diversify. For years, we've heard the public ask for diversification in our economy, greater investment in our local businesses, and the fostering of our local agriculture and fisheries. As we have learned from Hurricanes Irma and Maria, we, the people of the Virgin Islands, have learned to be resilient and to adapt. Lastly, the seconder of the opposition stated that we will now have to build back our economy due to the borders being shut for so long. If we want to build back our economy, we should build it stronger. If we establish a strong economy and income, the tourists will come back and we'll be ready for them. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. COVID didn't kill us, but it made us stronger and more secure in our own territory. In conclusion, Mr. Moderator, we believe that the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would result in a greater economic disruption because it puts our residents and government at a greater risk of facing financial ruin. As the great Hamilton Lavity Stout said, where there is no vision, the people perish. Is it the pandemic or lack of vision that is putting your territory and its people at risk? If we reopen our borders, we will create a greater risk and further economic disruption. Let's not walk right into it and regret it later. Thank you.
Time, 3 minutes, 4 seconds.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've heard some very interesting arguments, and now it is time for our judges, our adjudicators, to take about 15 minutes or less to decide on the best speaker and on the winning team. In the meantime, we're going to have a little fun, and so far I have to say the audiences to the debates have been very cooperative with me and have helped me considerably in having meaningful discussions during the adjudication period. So, the reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruption. I didn't know we had so many adjudicators. The whole audience of adjudicators. they all left the room. Okay. So I know I have a sister up there in the back who's gonna work with me. Yes, sister, what you think? The reopening of the Virgin Islands borders would lead to greater economic disruptions? Yeah. I know you got your notes and you got everything well prepared.
I don't think that the reopening of the borders will lead to greater economic disruption because our government has been working very assiduously to alleviate and difficulties and also, as someone said, balance lives and livelihoods.
Hold the mic a little, hold the mic a little closer to your mouth, please. Hold the mic a little closer to your
Okay,
mouth.
sorry.
Yeah.
I still have difficulty in defining what this COVID thing is, and I have my own analysis of the situation. And I see it was an opportunity for educational systems across the world to test how it would be to work online. Now they have discovered many different challenges, social, economic, and so on, as have been mentioned by the young people during the last debates and today also. And so I think, as with any other virus, if the borders are open, persons can self-regulate, and also groups can regulate themselves in their interactions. And so management can be made, can be had.
So you think
of the whole
management,
situation.
you think management is of the situation is effective in having the borders open?
Because it's all groups and organizations working hand in hand together to manage the situation. It's not just one particular segment of the community. It's all levels from top all the way down, working together in collaboration to manage.
But haven't you noticed, though, that that the virus has continually spread with persons closing their border, having closed borders? You still have this continuous spreading of the virus despite the protocols that are in place, the social distancing.
We are social creatures. As I was listening to the debates, I was thinking in terms of the example of a human being. There have been persons whose immune systems, they've been born with immune systems that have required them from birth to live in bubbles, and they're only handled through openings in those bubbles that are created to keep them alive for a particular time. But when it is a country, I do not see that borders can be kept closed indefinitely.
Okay. But I don't
the
know.
staycations that occurred, I think that this team mentioned about the stimulus coming from inside. Yes, for a length of time, yes, that economic stimulus can come from inside of the country, because I know Anegada was one of those places that persons said that they went to visit, enjoy the natural environment and so on, and also just Van Dyke. And I'm sure some of the other smaller islands when it got too difficult to remain on Tortola. So the internal stimulus, yes, but I do not see that a country can remain in a bubble, even with all of the technology and so on. People need to move and interact and shift perspective. You know, like how we say, get off the rock once in a while. And I already know to get off the rock and stop where so yes. So the stimulus from inside can happen. It has happened. The staycations and other shopping inside. Yesterday I made the comment to someone, if the trailers had stopped coming, if the other countries had said, okay, we're not sending any more trailers out, how would we feed ourselves? That is a very important aspect of our economic survival that we need to look at even more closely. Our agriculture and fishing. How do we sustain ourselves internally, as well as feed other persons who come to visit us and stay for a while?
I think those are certain lessons to be learned from the situation, from the pandemic. But it's being said that those of us who would want the borders to be reopened and to increase economic activity, basically putting money over lives. How do you view that statement? That there's got to be a err on the side of caution and lives should matter more than economic activity, even if we have to suffer some consequences economically.
I have to think about that a little longer.
I mean, how do you defend you know, the putting economic activity over your ability to live in a safe environment, disease that is not debilitated by such a pandemic.
So we are looking at just this one disease, but even if we close the borders and keep them closed, we have other diseases that will still be circulating within the bubble.
But not as bad as this pandemic. I mean, I know we like to argue that the flu, for example, has similar mortality figures. You know, you got thousands of people dying of the flu every year. Thousands infected, but we don't lock down the borders, and we don't have this big thing. So, you know, why are we so concerned about this one particular pandemic?
I'm still thinking about it and working out my own conclusion to the matter. If the borders are open and more persons are coming in, now the question would be not just the economic situation, but the social situation. Are we going to then say, okay, certain groups should not be coming in versus others? Or certain groups can't go out versus others? How do we handle that?
Well, I think we are handling it by putting safety protocols in place so that when you're coming in, we can check to see whether you're bringing the virus with you or not. And so that's how we are handling it. So we have the borders partially open, and we are trying to make sure that we are safe in doing so. I mean, I think I'm arguing for your point now.
Just recently, I read on Facebook these the news items that come up saying that there are variants of the virus, and there are suspicions about the variant that is coming from the UK. That is the reason why I was speaking about which groups are we going to allow in, which groups are we not going to allow to come in. And then countries are, I think one group mentioned it, there are, I think New Zealand was the group that was, the country that was mentioned, where they're selecting from amongst their close neighbors and economic partners who they will have to visit and have to interact with physically on the land. But within the Caribbean, there does not seem to be a decision to conclusively prevent persons from the UK entering the Caribbean. I think I've read that Jamaica is the one that is having that dissonance with UK visitors visiting them. They don't wish for that to happen because they are not being allowed to go out.
Well, we just started that ourselves. We just banned the UK visitors ourselves. Yeah. But anybody, this lady wants to make a contribution. Yeah. Well, no. Well, thank you very much for your points.
I caught her point late, but following up from her last point there, what happened when you do the research about SARS, that outbreak in 2003? What some countries did is that they closed their borders to visitors from the largely infected countries. So they didn't do total border closures. They just closed to those who were coming from infected countries, and also what they did, they had the same protocols in place that we do now. They did the 14-day quarantine, they did the mask wearing, and all of these things. So that was because we heard about the SARS outbreak, but it really didn't affect us, so we didn't really look at what the other countries did. So doing the research, finding out that information, it then became clear to me where these guidelines, these protocols that we have now, where they came from, in a sense, because they had the same protocols in place while they kept their borders open, but they only shut it to persons coming from the largely infected areas.
Okay, and you think, but don't go so fast. And so you're saying that we should not have closed our borders at all?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that because it's a novel pandemic, you know, it's something new, and we really didn't know the world over, governments the world over, they really didn't know what they were, what it was about and how to go about doing it. So closing the borders and, you know, putting things in place that would help when the borders reopen, I think that is what is helping in the long run. Then you just keep the borders open and you just allow things to flow.
Well, it makes me wonder now, though, whether we could have put these protocols in place earlier and not close the borders at all.
Good point, because even in the research with SARS, what one of the research turned up is that a lot of the governments, they overreacted. They said that they overreacted to the SARS pandemic. Well, epidemic, it wasn't a pandemic. They overreacted and some of them closed their borders prematurely. And for that, it cost over $20 billion to the tourism industry. So what they're saying is that there needs to be more communication between countries as it regards tourism and the outbreak of these various viruses as to how countries go about whether closing their borders or putting protocols in place.
Well, we have seen since the borders opened up in the Virgin Islands that we had a few increased cases. We were fortunate to detect most of those cases, virtually all, I think, except one. It seems like the one in Cocomaya, and we happened to be able to, seem to have contained the spread. There was no community spread, and the persons that were traced tested negative. So we seem to have escaped what could have been a very dangerous situation. We closed we opened the borders. Cases increase. Chances are that one or two might slip through the cracks. Chances are that one might get into a community member, a resident, and then spread. So it isn't the danger there. What's more valuable? Our lives or open up a business? So our livelihoods. What's more valuable? Our lives or our livelihood? Open up our businesses so that we can have economic activity and maintain a decent quality of life. Certainly, if we don't get money coming into the country, we can't have a stimulus package. We can't sustain ourselves to have the borders all closed. But then again, what's the good of making money if you're dying by the hundreds and we don't have the capacity to take care of all the persons that may contract the disease, and that'll put us in a dire situation. without the medical facilities and the medicines.
Point taken, but what we also need to keep in mind is that when you look at what happened during the Christmas season, a lot of countries, especially the Caribbean countries, we relaxed our protocols because we wanted to encourage travel. We wanted, there were some residents who wanted to come home and enjoy the Christmas season with their families. And that's a lesson that we can all learn from, all of the governments, that yes, we have protocols in place, but we also have to be careful that we do not relax them too much. And that's why we stress that protocols should be continuously updated and reinforced. So therefore, it's a lesson to learn from, because we also have to remember that no system is entirely perfect, and there will always be some slip through the cracks. Yeah. And when these slip through happen, then it's when we need to get back to that table and we regroup and we start all over again, and we see how we could tighten those cracks so that we don't have those slips.
Yeah. So we have, I guess we have managed the situation pretty well, in that we are now opening the borders with more information, and in addition, a vaccine. So it's almost as though the timing of the border reopening was a favorable decision, so that we could now begin the process of reinvigorating our livelihoods while protecting our lives. Yeah. The sister wanted to make another comment, I think. Yes?
Someone made mention about going back to the roots, and I...
Speak right into the mic, sister, please.
Okay.
Yes.
She does not strong? Okay. Someone made a point about going back to roots, and as they were speaking about the medical facilities and so on, prescriptions and other mass-produced medicines to cure situations are fine. A lot of money is spent by corporations to develop these medicines. What is happening on the other side is that the environment from which these prescriptions come is being degraded to a large extent across the world. So a lot of things are being now made synthetically. And the advice that I've been getting recently is that take your black wattle, take your trumpet bush, do your vervine and your other back to your roots treatments that you can try, to help yourself to keep your immune system a little stronger than, so it can keep off the virus.
For the vaccine.
Again, balance. Okay, concerning the vaccine, I would say this, and not just for COVID. I was speaking to a couple of ladies on Monday, and I was explaining to them, from what I understand, you are given a weakened form of the virus to stimulate your immune system to fight the virus, and then you will then be immune to it. Things can go.
Let me make one quick correction before we don't want inaccurate information to go out. According to the persons who have developed the vaccines, and the World Health Organization and other global organizations that's pushing the vaccines. The vaccine does not consist of the virus in any form. It does not consist of a weakened form or any form of the virus. It's they've created a way where the protein that's in the virus is I can't explain it, so I'm not even gonna try.
Yes.
But just suffice it to say that the correct information is that the vaccine does not comprise of parts of the virus or a weakened form of the virus.
Okay.
But I want to focus. I only want to interrupt at that particular point because of that information. But I want to focus on the point that you're making in terms of building your immune system, because the vaccine is supposed to have that effect on your immune system. So regardless of whether the virus is there or not, the vaccine is supposed to strengthen your immune system. And the question I think it becomes, and one that you're raising, is what's wrong with us boosting our own immune system? And to me, it seems as though the global health establishment don't seem to think that we could strengthen our immune system, or we would strengthen our immune system in time to deal with the vaccine, or strong enough to deal with the vaccine. I don't know which one is accurate, but it don't seem like we could manage the vaccine. Our immune system could manage the vaccine on its own if we ate right, exercised, got the proper nutrition. And that's what seems like everyone is saying. The vaccine is faster and more effective than us trying to strengthen our immune system. You obviously you disagree with that.
No. I thank you for reminding me of that aspect of the proteins being selected out of the DNA of the virus or other cells to quickly create the vaccine and so on. You see, there's so much information that comes out at you that you have to sift it through and to ponder over it for a length of time to really reach certain conclusions to satisfy yourself that you really understand. What I really was trying to say is that for populations, you do have to have a speed and an urgency to dealing with how fast the virus goes through amongst persons and groups. Yes, but I also look at it as there's information, there's knowledge being lost from the herbal and other herbal and alternative medicine standpoints that perhaps these things are not being discussed in the debates here, but perhaps that could have been another issue that could have been raised to help us understand that there are things that we can use and help in our natural environment, and that could assist us to be healthier. That's what I wanted to really say.
Yes, and actually I agree with you, and I was hoping that our government would seize this opportunity to encourage us or to motivate us, or motivate the population to engage or make healthier choices, right? That, knowing that this vaccine is here, knowing what the cause is, knowing what needs to happen in order to protect ourselves from it, that as a population, we would seize that opportunity to make healthier choices, improve our health, maintain our wellness in a fight against the vaccine. But clearly, as humans, we don't have, it requires a certain level of discipline. Yes. I know for me, I have to constantly be on guard when it comes to sugar and salt and the many other ingredients in so-called food that is harmful to me. So I have to be educated enough to read the labels, educated enough to know what choices to make, and disciplined enough to have the will to make those choices. Because everybody here knows that when it comes to sugar particularly, it's very difficult to resist. And you could make anything taste good with sugar and salt. You could probably put ketchup on a shoe and eat it. so we have challenges as populations all over the world, not just in the Virgin Islands, but we have challenges as populations to be disciplined enough to make the choices that we need to make put our bodies in a condition to fight off any kind of disease, and just much less something as bad as the coronavirus. You know, so I guess the vaccination is what we are pushing. You know, but thank you very much. Thank you very much for your help, your contribution. I really appreciate the contribution made by both of you. It helped us to have a nice discussion and to use up the time constructively. So our judges are back, and let me see if they're sweating or they relax. They seem pretty relaxed. So we'll call the debate back to order, and I'll invite at this time our adjudicators to come and give a 5-minute critique for best speaker and for the winning debating team. So this is our chief adjudicator, Ms. Benjamin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure everyone is anxious to hear the results, but I'll start by just indicating some of the things we saw, and let me probably take off this mask, that we should keep in mindful when you're public speaking. The ahs and arms like I just did, not good, very distracting. But I find that the different speakers, they were pretty good with the time savers, with the oohs and ahs. Not much of them, but the main thing that we all accepted was some of the issues was the body language. Because for us, we really think of body language for some of the speakers actually took away from what they were saying. So sometimes what you say is much more important to what you do. Because obviously the debate is what you say which give you the points. The body language helps to bring some emphasis and some points, but you have to be careful with it. You have to choose in your mind which one is important. You know, sometimes your point is more stronger. So you focus on the point and not the body language that may or may not go along with it. All right? That's one main thing that we would say would cause a little problems for the speakers, because it took away from the information they were giving. Both sides had really good arguments. They came up with a lot of research in terms of finding out what was going on at the time to emphasize their points, Kukumaya points, and all of these different things were a good point to bring the sources together. But in evaluating everything, we have to have a winner, obviously. And the best speaker was very close. We were very, 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 very torn between who is the winner. And trust me, I'll say this. I shouldn't say it, but Miss Evans, I've done a lot of them before. And I've never really seen so well put together rebuttal in most of the things most of the debates. But unfortunately, Miss Gift is actually the best. But Claudia Creque, you are the winner. With 636 points and Ciboney 623. So the points were really close, and was a really good performance, and I do believe you all worked very hard. So I think you still should be proud of yourself. So there we have it for the points and all comments.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Adjudicator Benjamin. Well, it was a close debate. Speakers did well, and I have to agree that the rebuttal from the opposition was significant. I think that as we go along, we've seen the debaters have taken the advice of the judges, because all throughout the debate, we've had adjudicators that emphasize the ability to make good rebuttals, spontaneous rebuttals, on-the-spot rebuttals, dealing with the case at hand, and in a lot of instances, it was felt that there was an attempt to script rebuttals before you got to the situation. So you had your rebuttal speech already prepared, before the end of the debate, and this wasn't the case this time. So it was a great job from both teams, but I think Miss Angelina Evans really showed what a rebuttal should look like. Yes, what it should really look like. So. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of our semifinal debate on the MOOT. The reopening of the Virgin Islands border would lead to greater economic disruption between the Ciboney Educational Center and the Claudia Creque Educational Center. Congratulations to the winning team and to the best speaker. Coming up next is our second semifinal, the economic and social consequence on the MOOT, the economic and social consequences of the lockdown, which is the stay-at-home orders, could cause more harm than the COVID-19 virus, which is going to be another exciting and interesting debate. And we are going to have the Brigada Flax Educational Center as well as the Elmore South High School debate in that MOOT. So again, I'm encouraging everyone to tune in, to come and support the young people and learn something in the process, because there are a lot of things that they're saying and debating that is, I'm sure, enhancing much of our opinions. So I'm Enka, your moderator for this debate. So we have a 5 minutes break, and we'll be right back with the second debate.